So many good memories are associated with it. So much time and energy goes into sowing and growing and preparing it. It has so much influence over our lives, from our culture to our spending to our health. Our connection with food is so crucial to what it means to be human. I'd like to start by sharing a personal story with you all today. I grew up in Helena, Montana, a town that isn't too large and isn't too small. Now, the first house I remember living in was situated right in the middle of town. And to 3-year-old me, we had this huge garden in the backyard that was one of my favorite places to be during the summer. In it, my dad grew corn, tomatoes, greens, beans, raspberries, all sorts of herbs. As a kid, I was taught about the resources and care that goes into maintaining those plants meant for eating. Even in a garden-sized plot like ours, think less than a 20th of an acre really, it took ample resources of water, fertilizer, and of course, planning, attention, and pest control to keep those plants healthy. Now, Montana has a relatively short garden growing season of only 90 to 120 days or so, thanks to late frost that comes in the spring and early frost that gets us in the fall. Even so, looking at the water resources alone for a garden like ours over those 90 days, it can be upwards of 10,000 gallons depending on precipitation. As a kid, it would have been impossible to even imagine how much goes into a farm 1,000, 10,000, even 100,000 times the size of our little garden. I think about it a lot today, though, especially as water becomes an increasingly precious commodity. Now, I'll be honest with you, one of the most special parts of the gardening process for me was getting to the reward at the end. Plucking a fresh ear of corn off the plant, husking it, throwing it on the grill, and sinking your teeth to those warm, buttery kernels, all within a 30-minute time span, was such a wonderful experience that seemed simple on the surface. But even at those innocent family barbecues, what I was really learning at a small scale was the complete and complex process of getting food on the plate in front of me. Eating it was just the final step. By engaging with the growing, by engaging with the cooking, I was learning hands-on that food doesn't come from a grocery store. It doesn't come from a restaurant, no. It starts in the ground, and then a whole lot more goes into it. Now, also on that small scale, my siblings and I got to experience the direct grower-to-consumer side of things. Instead of being normal kids, young entrepreneurs, and starting a lemonade stand, which I'm sure my parents would have preferred, my sister and I would drag this little wooden table out to the sidewalk, set up shop, and we would sell my dad's freshly grown squash to the neighbors. Yes, we did get in a little trouble for that, but it was a whole lot of fun. My connection with food growing up, it felt so rich. I get to look back on it knowing not only that it was an important childhood memory, but also that it contributed so much to my whole self, being active, being outside, being healthy. It was a link to my culture, members of my family in agriculture, and it was always so much more than just taking that final bite. However, as I grew older, I found myself drifting away from this deep connection with food, one that at the time I hardly registered I even had. In my family, agriculture has been a livelihood for some, but my parents ended up in different career paths, and a deep food connection just wasn't always a priority, which isn't abnormal. It's not something I necessarily even noticed being gone, right? Because I still ate food, and I still functioned, but it was more like lost potential for, in my opinion, an unmatched human experience, almost a primal practice, something that could enrich my life if tapped into again, but I had to make that active choice to do so. What has your connection with food been like in your own life? Stop and think about it. When it's not something we've even begun to identify and start really thinking about, it can be difficult to maybe acknowledge the disconnect we may have. Where do you fit in to the comprehensive process that goes into making meals and snacks so readily available every day? I'm not asking you to go all out farm to table in everything you do. That's not very practical for most of us. But I do want to get you rethinking your role and your impact in this system realistically and practically. Because it's been particularly hard for my generation to really grab hold of this universal disconnect we may have with our food. Our modern food system is extremely globalized. It's exceedingly complex for the average person to wrap their head around fully. First the Industrial Revolution, then the Green Revolution, and with it, rapid urbanization and all these other changing tides. Oh man, we found ourselves wound up in a system where our relationship with food is so heavily focused on its conclusion. Really, if you were born in the second half of the 20th century onward, you were born into this new commercial food system. As a 17-year-old, I received my wake-up call. As I was preparing for the exciting transition off to my new life at college, I also reflected on my time in Montana, how I had really grown to love the state I grew up in, and most importantly, what about it made it so special? In Montana, a connection with the land is a very crucial part of the way of life. There are many different ways to cultivate that connection, but one I discovered for myself was through my relationship with food. So, connecting with the food system for me, it doesn't necessarily mean going out and starting a garden again. And I don't foresee it selling squash on the street again either, or at least I hope not. What it can mean for me is going outside more and going fishing. It can mean eating meat, thoughtfully hunted by my dad, and knowing the story and the effort behind that hunt. It can mean taking a stroll down to the local farmer's market and supporting and learning from those producers. It can mean so many different things. Let me tell you, people and stories are what makes food so rich for me. So why can't it mean roasting more hot dogs around the fire or picking wild berries while out on a hike? There are no limits. I've even started talking to my grandparents more about their lives growing up on the family farm in Nebraska, and it's brought back particularly special connections like this. Sorry. What I'm asking you to do is think about where you fit into the food system. And importantly, are you satisfied with that? What does food really mean to you? Where can you try a different approach to interacting with it in your life? Let's start by asking, do you know where your produce comes from? Do you know where your steak grazed before it became a steak? What went into producing your plate, both in terms of the natural resources, because that's important, don't get me wrong, but also in terms of what the farmer or rancher gave, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Food is so much deeper than just taking that final bite. So let me share with you this, an opportunity to explore that's right at your fingertips and often ending up right at the tip of your fork. In 2014, the O'Donohue family Stanford Educational Farm was founded right here on this campus. I bet most of you didn't know that well over 15,000 pounds of produce are grown here at Stanford on the farm for our dining halls every year. We're eating it every day. The very first time I visited Stanford, the farm immediately caught my eye. I had this good gut feeling that I'd want to spend a lot of my time at Stanford there. And since September, I've been working as part of its student staff. Let me be sincere with you. This farm has truly started to reshape my life and my priorities. And I think seeking out opportunities like it could change yours too. Before giving this talk, I had the opportunity to speak with Farm Director Patrick Archie about why he thinks community agriculture is so important. He explained to me that reconnecting with our food is part of this even deeper human connection. Quote, farms like these are valuable in terms of the food they produce, but more so in terms of the opportunities for people to connect with each other, connect with the land, connect with natural systems and cycles. Patrick explained to me further that rebuilding these connections starts when we simply open our eyes to details, to processes, to potential for deeper relationships. And that all comes together when we put ourselves out there, try new things, and engage in the field. Now, knowing Patrick, he could have meant a literal cornfield when he said that, and that totally works if that's what you want to do. But in reality, the field can mean whatever food environment brings you the most value. The kitchen, the garden, the farm, any step in a new direction can be invaluable. Taking part in community agriculture and local food systems more broadly improves the sense of connectedness within our communities. It's good for local economies. It helps decrease food deserts and tackle hunger. it's better for the environment, and it holistically improves our personal wellness. Wow, that's a pretty sturdy list. So I'm wondering, can you picture what your community would look like if it had more access to these opportunities, to these impacts? Taking a step back, just think about what your own life would look like if you took the first step forward. Because, again, it's not all interpersonal. I'll let you in on a little secret. One of the most important parts of being intentional with food in my own life is that I get to reconnect with it for my inner self. Let me explain. By taking the time to understand where your food comes from, what goes into it, and especially when you're contributing to that work, oh my gosh, friends, you feel so much more gratitude, pride, joy with every single bite. Just like plucking that fresh ear of corn off the plant that I watched grow in my own backyard as a kid, I now get to pick a fresh orange off the tree at Stanford and cut into it moments later. It really is just like any old orange that you could get at the grocery store, sure. But once you start to understand and believe that there just is no such thing as just any old orange, the moment of biting into it will feel powerful. Folks, there's so many ways to engage with our food more deeply than just consuming it. Start your own garden. Join a community garden. Support local producers. Go to a local farmer's market. Join a community-supported ag program. Consider volunteering at a food bank, a local farm, or even the farm here on campus. You can even just try cooking more and and savoring the process, the ingredients, and of course, the final product, knowing all that it took to get it there on your plate. This change starts with you. Ultimately, it's entirely for you, and I promise it will taste great. Thank you.